The snow fell in silence, heavy and endless, blanketing the forest in a cruel kind of beauty. Inside a small cottage at the edge of the woods, two sisters stood at the window, watching the storm swallow the world whole. Snow White's pale hands trembled against the glass as if she could feel the cold pressing through, while Rose Red clenched her fists at her sides, her fiery hair catching the glow of the hearth behind her. "Another winter of waiting," Snow White whispered. Rose Red turned to her. "We don't wait. We endure." The sisters had lived in this solitude for years, ever since their father disappeared into the mountains and their mother passed away from grief. All they had was each other, bound by love yet divided by wounds they could never name aloud. Snow White longed for peace, for stillness, for a world where nothing threatened the fragile life they had built. Rose Red craved the opposite, movement, fire, a chance to break free from the shadows that suffocated them both. The storm raged, and with it came the beginning of the story neither of them were ready to face. The main conflict. One night, when the storm was at its worst, there was a knock at the door. The sound cut through the howling wind, sharp and unexpected. The sisters froze. Few travelers came through their woods, and fewer still survived the snow. Rose Red's eyes lit with excitement. "I'll open it." Snow White's hand shot out, gripping her sister's wrist. "What if it's danger? What if it's salvation?" Rose Red countered, her voice trembling with an emotion Snow White recognized all too well: hunger, not for food, but for something to break the endless monotony. The door creaked open, and the storm rushed inside, followed by a figure cloaked in black. The stranger's beard dripped with ice, his eyes glittering like obsidian. He fell to the floor with a groan, the heavy sack he carried spilling across the threshold. Rose Red bent to help him, but Snow White lingered back, her instincts clawing at her heart. Something about the man's presence unsettled her. When he woke by the fire, he gave his name only as Aldrich. He claimed to be a wanderer, burdened with treasure stolen from a cruel dwarf who had enslaved him. Rose Red leaned in close to listen to his stories, captivated by his bravery. Snow White, however, noticed the way his hands curled possessively over the sack, as though its contents mattered more than life itself. That night, as her sister slept, Snow White whispered to herself, "We should not have opened the door." Emotional depth and rising tension. Days passed, and Aldrich remained in the cottage, his presence thickening the air. He told stories of distant lands, of castles lit with gold, of wars fought against tyrants. Rose Red glowed under his gaze, her laughter returning for the first time in years. Snow White, however, saw the cracks beneath his charm, the moments when his eyes darkened, when he muttered to himself about curses and debts unpaid. Snow White's conflict deepened. She longed to protect her sister, but she also feared driving Rose Red further away. For years, she had been the quiet, careful one, the voice of caution. Rose Red had grown weary of her warnings, seeing them as chains rather than care. One evening, Snow White confronted Aldrich in the silence of the woodshed while Rose Red slept. "You should leave," she said softly. "You carry danger with you." Aldrich's eyes narrowed. "And yet your sister clings to every word I speak. Perhaps it is not danger she fears, but you, your endless smothering." The words pierced deeper than any knife. Snow White stood frozen as Aldrich brushed past her, his laughter low and cruel. That night, Snow White wept quietly while Rose Red dreamed of kingdoms beyond the snow. The first twist. One morning, Aldrich's sack tore open, spilling its contents across the cottage floor. Gold coins scattered like sunlight, jewels rolled into the corners, and among them, an ancient crown, tarnished but unmistakably regal. Snow White gasped. "This is no treasure of a dwarf. This is stolen from a king." Rose Red's eyes widened, but Aldrich seized the crown, his voice sharp. "It was mine before it was his. You don't understand." In that moment, Snow White saw the truth: Aldrich was no wanderer, but a prince cast out for treachery. His charm was a mask, his burden a weapon. She begged Rose Red to see reason. He will destroy us. But Rose Red, her heart tangled between longing and loyalty, shook her head. Maybe he's our chance to be free. Don't you want more than this prison of snow? The sisters, once inseparable, now stood on opposite sides of a widening chasm. The dark descent. As the weeks stretched on, Aldrich's shadow grew. He spoke of reclaiming his throne, of using the sisters to aid him. Rose Red began to dream of palaces and power, while Snow White retreated into herself, her fear consuming her. But danger came not only from Aldrich. The dwarf he had wronged was searching, moving closer with every passing storm. Strange footprints appeared in the snow outside their door, clawed and heavy. At night, they heard whispers in the wind, voices promising vengeance. Snow White's dreams grew darker, visions of blood on the snow, of her sister lying lifeless, of a crown shattering into pieces. She woke trembling, clutching Rose Red's hand, but her sister always pulled away, lost in her own fantasies of escape. Their love, once their anchor, now felt like a chain dragging them both into ruin. The second twist. The storm broke one evening when the dwarf himself appeared. He was smaller than Snow White expected, his beard tangled with ice, his eyes burning with malice. He demanded the return of the crown, swearing destruction upon anyone who sheltered the thief. Snow White, terrified but resolute, pleaded with Aldrich to surrender the treasure. But Aldrich, drunk with pride, refused. In the chaos that followed, Rose Red made a choice no one expected. She seized the crown from Aldrich's hands and hurled it into the fire. The jewels cracked, the gold melted, and the dwarf shrieked in rage before vanishing into the storm, his curse broken. Aldrich fell to his knees, staring at the ashes of his dream. His charm dissolved into something monstrous, his voice twisting with fury. He turned on Rose Red, his betrayal complete. But Snow White stepped between them. For the first time, her quiet strength blazed like fire. You will not touch her. Climax. The struggle was fierce. Aldrich, once a prince, fought with the desperation of a man who had lost everything. Snow White wielded nothing but her courage, and Rose Red, torn between her love for him and her loyalty to her sister, hesitated until the very end. When Aldrich lunged for Snow White, Rose Red struck him down with the iron poker from the hearth. His body crumpled, and the snow outside swallowed his final cry. The sisters stood in silence, the fire crackling between them, the crown reduced to molten gold. Conclusion. For days, neither spoke of what had happened. The cottage felt heavier, burdened with the memory of betrayal and blood. But slowly, as the storms began to fade and spring hinted at the edges of the forest, they began to heal. One morning, Snow White sat by the window, watching the ice melt from the branches. Rose Red joined her, her hand reaching across to cover her sister's. I wanted so much to escape, Rose Red whispered. But I almost lost you instead. Snow White squeezed her hand, tears in her eyes. We are enough. We've always been enough. The forest stirred with life, the first flowers pushing through the thaw. Yet the memory of Aldrich lingered, a reminder of how easily dreams could turn to ruin. And though the sisters found peace again, they knew the world beyond the snow was waiting. The story of Snow White and Rose Red was not over. It had only just begun.